She scrubbed floors while they mocked her poverty. They whispered about her fatherless child, calling her a charity case. But when the company's mysterious new owner walked into that break room, their cruelty turned to shock because the billionaire they'd been praising all morning was about to reveal a secret that would destroy their careers forever. If you believe karma always finds its way, stay until the end. This story will restore your faith in justice. Hit that like button and subscribe, because you won't want to miss what happens next. The fluorescent lights of Morrison Financial Group flickered to life at 5 in the morning, but Angela Bennett had already been awake for over an hour. She stood in the executive washroom on the 23rd floor, her reflection staring back at her from the spotless mirror she just cleaned. At 28 years old, exhaustion had etched faint lines around her eyes, but there was something unbreakable in her gaze. Her navy blue janitor's uniform was clean, but faded from too many washes, and the sole of her right shoe had a patch of duct tape she hoped no one would notice. But they always noticed, and they always commented. Angela moved through the building like a ghost, completing her tasks with quiet efficiency. She emptied trash bins, vacuumed plush carpets, and wiped down mahogany desks that cost more than she earned in 6 months. By 7 o'clock, the executives would start arriving, and she preferred to be invisible by then. It was easier that way. Easier than facing their pointed stares and whispered remarks about the single mother who cleaned their offices. Her son Isaiah was her entire world. At 4 years old, he had his mother's warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Every morning, Angela dropped him at a neighbor's apartment before her shift, and every night, no matter how bone-tired she felt, she read him stories and helped him practice his letters. He was bright, curious, and kind, everything she'd hoped to give him despite their circumstances. The cruelty started small at Morrison Financial Group, like most workplace harassment does. A senior vice president named Stephen Palmer had been the first to make comments about her presence. He'd wrinkle his nose when she cleaned his office, as if poverty had a smell he found offensive. Then came Veronica Hayes, the HR director who wore designer suits and wielded her authority like a weapon. Veronica seemed personally offended by Angela's existence, going out of her way to create additional work or complain about invisible streaks on windows. Leslie Cooper, Veronica's executive assistant, was perhaps the worst of all. She spread gossip like wildfire, turning Angela's life into break-room entertainment. Where was the father? Was she on welfare? Did she really think she belonged in a building like this? The whispers followed Angela through every corridor, but she kept her head down and her dignity intact. She had Isaiah to think about, and this job provided health insurance he desperately needed for his asthma. On this particular Tuesday morning, everything changed. The company had been buzzing for weeks about an acquisition. Morrison Financial Group was being purchased by a mysterious billionaire named Christopher Hayes, a man known for turning struggling companies into empires. The employees were excited, hopeful that new ownership might mean bonuses and better opportunities. They researched him obsessively, discussing his net worth and business acumen with the kind of reverence usually reserved for celebrities. Angela paid little attention to the gossip. Billionaires existed in a different universe, one that would never intersect with hers. She focused on her work, moving efficiently through her morning routine. But fate had other plans. Her neighbor called at 8:30 with an emergency. Her mother had fallen and needed to go to the hospital immediately. There was no one else to watch Isaiah. Angela's heart sank as she realized she had no choice but to bring him to work with her. She'd never done it before, terrified of giving Veronica another reason to target her. But what else could she do? Isaiah needed her, and she couldn't leave him alone. When Angela walked into the building's back entrance with Isaiah's small hand tucked in hers, she tried to stay calm. He carried his backpack with coloring books and toys, promised to be quiet as a mouse. She settled him in a storage room with his activities, checking on him between tasks. For a few hours, it seemed like they might escape notice. Then came the company-wide announcement. Christopher Hayes would be arriving today. Earlier than expected, all staff were to gather in the main conference hall at 11 o'clock for his first address. The building erupted in excited energy. Veronica strutted through the hallways in her most expensive suit, barking orders and ensuring everything looked perfect. Stephen rehearsed talking points, hoping to impress the new owner. Even the usually composed executives seemed nervous. Eager to make good impressions, Angela hoped to skip the meeting entirely. But a supervisor specifically told her that Mr. Hayes had requested everyone attend. Every single employee, regardless of position, it was unusual, but Angela didn't question it. She brought Isaiah with her, tucking them both into the very back corner of the conference hall, where perhaps they wouldn't be noticed. But Veronica noticed everything. Her sharp eyes landed on Angela and Isaiah, and her face twisted with disgust. She marched over, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. Her voice was loud enough to draw attention from nearby employees. "Are you kidding me right now?" Veronica hissed. "You brought a child to a professional corporate meeting? Do you have any idea how inappropriate this is?" Angela kept her voice low and respectful. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Hayes, it was an emergency. My childcare fell through, and I was told attendance was mandatory." "This is exactly the problem with hiring people like you," Veronica continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "No professionalism, no standards. You're an embarrassment to this company." Stephen Palmer approached, sensing an opportunity to join in. "She's right, you know. This is a workplace, not a daycare. If you can't handle your personal responsibilities without bringing them to the office, maybe you're not cut out for this position." Other employees had started watching now. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. A few even pulled out their phones, filming the confrontation with barely concealed amusement. Angela felt Isaiah press closer to her leg, his small hand gripping her uniform. She could feel him trembling, and that broke her heart more than any insult could. Tears pricked her eyes, but Angela refused to let them fall. She wrapped her arm around Isaiah, holding him protectively. She wouldn't give Veronica the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Not here, not in front of her son. What Veronica and Stephen didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that 5 years ago, Angela's life had been different. She'd been a business student at community college, working part-time at an upscale hotel lounge to pay her tuition. She'd had dreams of becoming a financial analyst, of building a stable career that would make her late mother proud. One evening, a man had walked into the lounge and sat at the bar. He wasn't like the usual wealthy guests who demanded attention and flaunted their status. He was handsome but quiet, seeming almost uncomfortable in his expensive clothes. When Angela served him, he'd thanked her with genuine warmth, and they'd started talking during her break. His name was Christopher, he'd told her. He didn't mention his last name, didn't talk about his money or his business. Instead, they talked about dreams and fears, about the pressure of expectations and the desire to be seen as more than just a job title or bank account. He told her he was taking a week away from his life, trying to figure out who he was beyond what his family demanded he become. Over the next several days, they kept meeting. Angela would finish her shift, and Christopher would be waiting. They walked through the city at night, ate at diners instead of fancy restaurants, and talked about everything. For the first time in her life, Angela felt truly understood. And Christopher seemed lighter in her presence, as if he could finally breathe. The connection between them was undeniable. On his last night before returning to his life, they'd spent hours talking on a rooftop overlooking the city. He'd kissed her under the stars and promised he'd come back. He'd left her a note with his hotel room number and a promise to explain everything, to find a way for them to be together properly. But when Angela went to the hotel the next morning, he was already gone. Emergency, the staff had told her. Family business. He'd left in the middle of the night. She'd waited for him to call, to reach out, but weeks passed in silence. Eventually, she realized that whatever they'd shared had been real for her, but perhaps just a brief escape for him. Then came the morning she saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She'd tried desperately to find Christopher, but she'd only known his first name and that he worked in some kind of business. It was impossible. She'd made the decision to raise her baby alone, to give him all the love she had, even if she couldn't give him wealth or a father. She dropped out of college when Isaiah was born, needing immediate income and health insurance. The janitorial job at Morrison Financial Group had been a blessing at the time, offering stability when she had none. She'd told herself it was temporary, that she'd find a way back to her dreams eventually. But life as a single mother was expensive and exhausting, and temporary had become 4 years. Angela never told anyone about Isaiah's father. It wasn't shame that kept her silent. It was dignity. She refused to be pitied, refused to let people see her as a victim of some man's abandonment. She'd made choices and she owned them. Isaiah was hers, fully and completely, and she didn't need anyone's judgment or sympathy. What Angela didn't know was that Christopher had never forgotten her either. On that emergency trip home 5 years ago, he'd returned to find his family in crisis. His father had suffered a massive heart attack, and his older brother had died in a car accident the same week. Suddenly, the family business empire had fallen on Christopher's shoulders. At 28 years old, he'd become CEO of a multinational corporation, responsible for thousands of employees and billions in assets. The grief and responsibility had consumed him. By the time he'd had a moment to breathe, weeks had passed. When he'd finally tried to return to that hotel to find Angela, she was gone. The lounge had closed. No one had any information about a college student who'd worked there briefly. He'd hired private investigators over the years, but Angela Bennett was a common enough name, and without more information, the searches led nowhere. Until 3 months ago. During the acquisition process for Morrison Financial Group, Christopher had been reviewing employee files when a name caught his eye: Angela Bennett. Maintenance staff. When he'd requested her employment photo, his heart had stopped. It was her. After 5 years of searching, there she was, cleaning offices in a building he was about to own. He'd planned this moment carefully. He wanted to see her first, to understand her life before revealing himself. The security footage had shown him everything, not just Angela's quiet efficiency and dedication, but also the cruelty she endured. He'd watched Veronica and Stephen's harassment with growing fury. This woman who'd shown him such kindness, such genuine humanity, was being treated like dirt in his company. Now, as Christopher walked through the main entrance of Morrison Financial Group with his executive team, he could hear the buzz of excitement from the conference hall employees had been gathering for 30 minutes, eager for their first glimpse of their new owner. His COO had suggested a traditional speech, discuss vision, growth, profitability. But Christopher had other plans. He entered the conference hall to enthusiastic applause. Veronica Hayes was front and center, her smile blindingly white and utterly fake. Stephen Palmer stood beside her, chest puffed with self-importance. Christopher's eyes scanned the room, looking for the one person who mattered. He found her in the back corner, trying to make herself invisible. His breath caught. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, though life had clearly been hard on her. And beside her, holding her hand with visible anxiety, was a small boy with Angela's eyes. Christopher's world tilted on its axis. A son. He had a son. He forced himself to begin the prepared remarks, talking about the company's future and his expectations for excellence. But his eyes kept drifting to the back of the room, to Angela's bowed head and protective stance around their child. Then he changed course. "I want to talk about values," Christopher said, his voice taking on an edge. "I've spent the last several weeks reviewing operations here, and I've learned a great deal about the culture of this organization. Tell me, what do you all believe this company stands for?" Veronica jumped at the opportunity, stepping forward with her polished corporate speak. "We maintain the highest standards of professionalism and excellence. We hire only the best and expect nothing less than perfection." "The highest standards," Christopher repeated slowly. "Interesting. Let me ask you something else. How do you treat people in this building? Everyone from executives to maintenance staff?" The room shifted uncomfortably. Veronica's smile faltered slightly. "We treat everyone appropriately for their position," she said carefully. "Their position," Christopher said. He pulled out his phone, connecting it to the presentation screen. "I'd like to show you all something. For the past month, I've been reviewing security footage from this building." The screen flickered to life, showing the break room from 2 weeks earlier. The footage showed Veronica deliberately knocking over a cup of coffee, then calling Angela over to clean it while making demeaning comments. Another clip showed Stephen instructing Angela to re-clean an already spotless office 3 times while he laughed with colleagues. The room fell into horrified silence. Veronica's face had gone pale. Stephen looked like he might be sick. "I've seen hours of this," Christopher continued, his voice cold. "Systematic harassment of an employee who has done nothing but her job with dignity and excellence. And what I find most revealing is that you," he pointed at Veronica and Stephen, are the same people who have spent all morning trying to impress me with your professionalism." He started walking through the crowd toward the back of the room. People moved aside quickly, sensing that something significant was happening. Angela had her eyes closed, holding Isaiah close. She looked like she wanted to disappear. Christopher stopped in front of them, and Angela finally looked up. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years, and he watched recognition flood her face. She gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. He knelt down to be at eye level with the little boy, who was watching him with curious, intelligent eyes. Eyes that looked remarkably like Christopher's own. "Hello," Christopher said gently. "What's your name?" The boy looked at his mother, who nodded slightly, tears streaming down her face. "Isaiah Christopher Bennett," the child said proudly, in the way only a 4-year-old could. Christopher felt like he'd been punched in the chest. "Christopher," he repeated, his voice breaking slightly. He looked up at Angela, saw the truth written all over her face. He stood addressing the room, but never taking his eyes off Angela. "5 years ago, I met someone who changed my life. She saw me as a person, not as a name or a bank account. She was kind, genuine, and real in a way I'd never experienced. I had to leave suddenly due to a family emergency, and I've spent every day since trying to find her again." The entire conference hall was silent. People were pulling out their phones, recording, but Christopher didn't care. "I had no idea," he continued, his voice stronger now, "that when I acquired this company, I would find her here. And I certainly didn't know that while you were all researching my net worth and business deals, preparing to impress me with your professionalism, some of you were tormenting the mother of my child." The gasps echoed through the room. Veronica looked like she might faint. Stephen had gone completely white. Christopher turned to face them, and now his voice carried the full weight of his authority. "Veronica Hayes, you're terminated effective immediately, not just for creating a hostile work environment, though that alone would be sufficient, but for revealing a complete lack of human decency. Stephen Palmer, same verdict. You're done." He looked at Leslie and several others who'd participated in the harassment. "You're suspended without pay pending a full investigation. If even half of what I've seen is confirmed, you'll be joining them." Then Christopher turned back to Angela, his voice softening. "I owe you an explanation. I owe you 5 years of explanations. And I owe my son, our son, everything I should have been there to give him." Angela was openly crying now, but she found her voice. "I tried to find you," she whispered. "I only knew your first name. I thought maybe it didn't mean to you what it meant to me." "It meant everything," Christopher said. "It still does. The week I had to leave, my father had a heart attack and my brother died. I became CEO overnight. By the time I could breathe again, you were gone. I've been looking ever since." He glanced down at Isaiah, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Can we talk? Somewhere private? I have so much I want to say, so much to make right." Angela nodded, still overwhelmed. As they moved toward a private office, Christopher turned back to address the stunned crowd one final time. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here," he said. "Character isn't determined by job titles or bank accounts. Angela Bennett has more dignity and strength than most people in this room will ever possess. She raised our son alone, worked herself to exhaustion, and endured your cruelty without ever losing her grace. That's the kind of person I want representing my company. The question now is whether any of you deserve to work alongside her." In the private office, Christopher and Angela talked for hours. He explained everything: his family tragedy, his desperate search, his regret. She told him about the pregnancy, her decision to raise Isaiah alone, her struggles and triumphs. They talked about Isaiah's personality, his favorite books, his dreams of becoming an astronaut. Christopher didn't make demands or assumptions. He offered support, financial help for Angela to return to school if she wanted, a proper position in the company based on her actual qualifications, child support for Isaiah, and most importantly, the opportunity to be a father. But he was clear. He would follow Angela's lead. She'd been Isaiah's parent for 4 years, and he respected that completely. Angela surprised herself with her answer. "I didn't raise Isaiah hoping for a rescue," she said firmly. "I raised him with love because he's my son, And I wanted him to know his worth isn't determined by what we have or don't have. But he deserves to know his father. And if you're serious about being part of his life, then we'll figure this out together. Christopher felt something shift in his chest. This was the woman he remembered. Strong, principled, refusing to be diminished by anyone or anything. I never stopped thinking about you, he said. When I couldn't find you, I told myself maybe it wasn't meant to be. But I never forgot how you made me feel. Like I mattered as a person, not as a legacy or a bank account. You do matter, Angela said softly. You always did. They agreed to take things slowly, to let Isaiah adjust to having a father in his life. Christopher set up a trust fund for Isaiah's future and insisted on helping Angela pursue her abandoned business degree. But more than that, he wanted to be present for soccer games and bedtime stories, for skinned knees and parent-teacher conferences. When they finally emerged from the office, the building had changed. News had spread instantly. Some employees approached Angela with genuine apologies, tears streaming down their faces as they admitted their complicity in the harassment. Others quietly cleaned out their desks, knowing their behavior had been captured on camera and documented. Angela handled it all with the grace she'd always possessed. She accepted sincere apologies and ignored insincere ones. She held her head high as she walked through the building, no longer invisible, no longer diminished. The story spread beyond Morrison Financial Group within days. News outlets picked it up. The billionaire CEO who'd found his lost love while reviewing employee treatment in his newly acquired company. But Christopher and Angela ignored the media attention. They were focused on what mattered, building a relationship with their son and perhaps rebuilding what they'd started 5 years ago. 3 months later, Angela started classes again, pursuing her business degree in the evenings while working in Morrison Financial Group's analysis department. During the day, Isaiah had adjusted remarkably well to having a father, especially one who showed up to every event and never missed a bedtime call when he traveled. As for Veronica and Stephen, they discovered that reputation matters in the corporate world. The footage of their harassment had gone viral, making them virtually unemployable in their field. The cruelty they dispensed so freely had come back to haunt them in ways they'd never imagined. Angela never gloated about the turn her life had taken. She remained the same kind, dignified person she'd always been. But now when she walked through the halls of Morrison Financial Group, she did so with her head high and her son's hand in hers, knowing that character always outlasts cruelty, and that dignity is something no one can take away unless you give it to them. Never judge someone's worth by their position or circumstances. Angela had more dignity in her worn-out shoes than her bullies had in their designer heels. True character shows in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, and karma has a way of balancing the scales when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and redemption. Drop a comment telling us about a time someone underestimated you. We read every single one. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that bullies don't win in the end. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. Remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know their story or who they might become. See you in the next video.